New charges against the alleged Delphi murderer, who prosecutors say is responsible for the brutal murders of 2 Indiana teens nearly 7 years ago.
What's up, guys? True Crime King back. All right, so breaking news. Richard Allen hit with an additional murder charge and kidnapping charges, right? Now, unlike the Idaho case where I'm totally sold and convinced of Bryan Kohberger's guilt, this case, I'm not so convinced about Richard Allen, and this one definitely has more of a whodunit aspect to it, if you ask me. But first, let's hear about these new charges.
Prosecutors filed this request the same day as the Indiana Supreme Court made a major ruling in the case.
When the prosecution goes into a trial, they want to cover all their bases. And by including the murder counts for intentional, the murder counts for felony murder, and the underlying kidnapping, it really protects them.
We've been following the case of Richard Allen long before his arrest in October 2022. The crime itself dates back to February 14th, 2017, when 13-year-old Abigail Williams and her friend, 14-year-old Liberty German, went missing in the small Hoosier town of Delphi. The girls had been hiking along a bridge and trail in the area, and the next day their bodies were recovered nearby. Years went by before an arrest was made, the public only being shown a composite drawing of a potential suspect and the so-called down the hill video taken by one of the girls before her death.
All right, I want to stop real quick. I will say, Richard Allen, this apparently is this guy in the video, right? He did admit to police that he was at the trail on the same day the girls were there, right? And he did admit he owned a blue jacket just like this one. You know, there is some evidence that does point right at Richard Allen. And apparently he did also confess, allegedly, right? But there's some other people that I'm still suspicious of, like Keegan Kline and his father Tony. Those are just two. But we'll get into that.
But then, on October 28th, 2022, officials announced the arrest of Richard Allen.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
According to a probable cause affidavit released later, Allen was interviewed by police years before his arrest and even admitted he'd been near the crime scene the day of the murders.
That's what I was just saying. He told the cops the day of the murders that he was at the trail. I guess they just forgot about it. I mean, I don't know how you do that, right?
What's more, a bullet found just feet from the girls' lifeless bodies was a match to a weapon registered to Allen. Witnesses who were along the trail that day described seeing a man who was muddy and bloody, wearing an outfit similar to that shown in the Snapchat video. Investigators believe that man is Richard Allen.
A step in the right direction. It's concerning that he's a local guy. So I think just different emotions. Again, this is a step in the right direction. This is the first step into getting into court and having a trial.
But
now, if anybody like Crime Circus, Drippity Drop, whatever, if he was going on and trying to make a conspiracy about this guy, that would make a whole lot more sense than Bryan Kohberger, in my opinion.
But since his arrest in 2022, Allen's case still hasn't made it to trial. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and pleaded not guilty to both. Days later, he was appointed 2 public defenders, Andrew Baldwin and Anthony Rosie. Their involvement in the case was a topic of conversation at the Supreme Court hearing just this week.
I want Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie to continue to represent me until this case is resolved one way or the other.
Baldwin and Rosie were pulled from Allen's case in October this year after Special Judge Francis Gull called their actions grossly negligent. This came after a former employee at Baldwin's law firm admitted to taking photos of crime scene pics without Baldwin's knowledge. That person is now facing criminal charges. At a Supreme Court hearing on Thursday, Mark Lehman spoke on behalf of Allen, requesting 3 key points: that Rosie and Baldwin be reinstated as Allen's attorneys, that Judge Gull be removed from the case, and that the case head to trial within 70 days.
The relief that Mr. Allen wants is he wants attorneys Baldwin and Rosie on the case, and he wanted a speedy trial. And in order to show that that's an intimate part of the trial tactics and decisions that were going on, was to present that to the court and make sure that this court had an opportunity to rule on it if it wanted to do so.
Does your argument depend on our having found that the trial court's underlying findings of gross negligence and incompetence were wrong?
No.
Well, if she's right about those findings, why isn't the relief that she...
Real quick, okay. I'm of the opinion that if a guy's being charged with, with 2 counts of murder, kidnapping, and all that, right, and his life's on the line, he should have whoever the hell he wants to represent him, right? That's my opinion. You only get one shot at this, right? That's how I feel, at least. And what was the other point? And a speedy trial. He wants a speedy trial, right? I don't have documents right in front of me, but he's been in jail waiting on this trial for forever, it seems like, right?
You ordered appropriate.
First, Justice Slaughter, she's not right about those findings. Second, there isn't a record to even substantiate those findings. But third, those issues don't involve...
If there's not a record, maybe then the findings aren't proper. But if the findings are correct, why doesn't what she did follow from those findings?
Because the client has the autonomy to choose the direction of his representation, and
that's what I believe.
If he is aware that there may have been some sort of violation, or the judge feels that there's a violation, he is allowed to waive that concern and to proceed forward with the lawyers that he has developed a relationship.
Lehman argued it's Richard Allen's choice who represents him.
This is more than just a choice of counsel case. Like, this is an interference of counsel. This is the right to counsel itself.
Yeah, put yourself in Richard Allen's position, right? You got these lawyers that they were your lawyers. You develop a personal relationship. You trust them. Then they get thrown off the case, right? And then you get some other lawyer that you haven't worked with before, and you might not like them as much, or whatever the reason, right? If you want the other lawyers back, I don't see what the big problem with that is. That's how I feel. Let me know how you guys feel.
Because the right to counsel is meaningless. If a judge can say, stop all work, I know you've got a relationship going on, stop it all until you come to my chamber.
And if the police, in any case, right, we're looking for somebody to frame and somebody to solve a murder, right, this would be the case, right? Not the one in Moscow, Idaho, right? It would be one like this that's been years and years going unsolved now, right? And it keeps coming back up, and the public wants somebody to fry for this, right? So this is the kind of case that, I would think somebody would be more likely to be framed than, the Moscow, Idaho one, where they actually have direct evidence and plenty of it, too.
And then says, you're off the case, whether we go into the courtroom or you stay in here, you're off the case.
Indiana Supreme Court justices even heard a letter penned by Allen himself begging for Baldwin and Rosie's representation.
On October 11, 2023, Rick Allen filed the following. Dear Judge Gall, please accept this letter as confirmation that I have communicated with my attorney, Bradley Rosie, regarding the circumstances regarding the leaking of sensitive information in this case. I am aware that the images of crime scene photos and other related documents were taken by a friend and former employee of Attorney Baldwin at Attorney Baldwin's office. I have discussed with Attorney Rosie the potential impact that the distribution of these documents could have on my defense. Attorney Rosie has also communicated with me that the prosecutor has requested that the attorney be disqualified from representing me in this case. I do not want this to happen. I want Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie to continue to represent me until this case is resolved one way or the other.
The Indiana Supreme Court ultimately ruled in Allen's favor, agreeing Baldwin and Rosie will represent him. Long crime legal analyst Julie Rendelman.
Okay, so they did agree, and with Richard and what I was saying. So they put them back on the case.
Says that decision, paired with Allen's letter, means there's a slim chance for future arguments about counsel.
The Supreme Court made clear in their decision that Richard Allen has a right to decide the defense attorneys that he wants to represent him. And that there's really no reason why they shouldn't be permitted to do so. Now, keep in mind, one of the interesting things is that at the end of the day, it's going to be hard-pressed if Richard Allen loses the case, that he's suddenly going to say that he had ineffective assistance of counsel. Because remember, he's the one who chose them. So,
okay, now, if that happens, then, I think he shouldn't even be allowed to say that. If, he wrote the judge a letter, saying he wants these guys. I totally agree with that part of it. But then, if he ends up losing this case and tries to make an argument for ineffective assistance of counsel, I think that would be totally ridiculous. He obviously wants these guys to represent him.
So if they continue to make some of the mistakes they made that got them taken off in the first place, it's going to put him in a hard position appellate-wise.
That was going to be one of my follow-up questions because I watched part of the hearing yesterday and the justices were addressing this if there was an appeal in the future. But it sounds like that likely would be thrown out because Richard Allen has doubled or tripled down saying, I want these attorneys to represent me.
It will be more difficult for Richard Allen to claim at the end of the day if he loses the case that his attorneys were ineffective or that he didn't want them in the first place because, as you indicated, he's doubled down and said, these are the attorneys that I want, despite any mistakes that have been made by them in the past. It doesn't give them carte blanche to be reckless throughout the trial, but it certainly limits Richard Allen in terms of the potential for appellate process.
The Indiana Supreme Court denied Allen's other requests to remove Judge Gull from the case and to speed up the trial process. But the one victory may be meaningful for Allen's case. I'm wondering if it is a small win for Richard Allen because he's worked with these two attorneys from day one, so they've had years of preparation.
Absolutely. I think it's a huge win for Richard Allen. He's comfortable with these attorneys. Now, perhaps his perspective is off. He may just want them because he's worked with them for so long.
Let's get to the new.
To consider any and all charges to decide what, if any, are appropriate in terms of what they've proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
The charges haven't officially been added, but according to Rendelman, it's likely.
The judge will have to make the ultimate decision as to whether or not to add those charges, and it will be based on whether or not the facts that had been initially presented are supported by the new charges. It seems like they are, so it seems like the judge will in fact allow that to happen. One of the things the defense could argue is that it prejudices them because they weren't aware of these new charges. But the argument on the part of the prosecution is, well, you saw all the facts and you knew that it made out the specific charges, so you've been on notice since the beginning that these charges were potentially coming down the line.
Right now, Allen's trial date is scheduled for this fall. Rendelman says that date may stick.
Keep in mind that Richard Allen asked for a much shorter date for trial, and he was unsuccessful in that request. Is October reasonable? I don't think it's unreasonable. Keep in mind, he has now the attorneys he had before who are well informed on the case and have probably reviewed much, if not most, of the discovery. So I'm not sure October is an unreasonable date to have an expectation of trial.
Yeah, so later this year, we're going to have two of the biggest trials in the past decade, right? We're going to have Koberger and this Delphi Richard Allen trial. It's going to be crazy. But anyway, that's basically it. Richard Allen, hit with additional murder charge and kidnapping charges, and he's got his old lawyers back. But I will say I am not sold on Richard Allen being the suspect yet. I just really started getting back into this case. I'm gonna do some more videos on this, but stay tuned. Let me know what you guys think. And until next time, True Crime King, out.